Namaskar and a very warm welcome to everyone joined in today on our 37th Know Your Species, Know Your Zoo talk. This talk is being organized by the Central Zoo Authority, New Delhi, as part of the ongoing Azadi Ka Amrit Mahotsav. The Mahotsav is a 75-week-long celebration to commemorate 75 years of India's independence, which falls on the 15th of August 2022. The Central Zoo Authority is taking the celebration forward outreach campaign entitled Conservation to Coexistence, The People Connect. Under the helm of this campaign, we will be showcasing 75 conservation priority species and 75 zoos, highlighting one species and one zoo each week. We are currently in week 37 of the celebration, with the Chital as the species in focus and the mini zoo cum deer park Bhatinda as the zoo in focus. Joined in today to speak to us on this species is Dr. Chitranjan Davey. Dr. Davey has 2 decades of experience being directly involved in wildlife research and conservation, with first-hand experience in managing multiple conservation-based projects at once. He has done his doctorate from the Wildlife Institute of India on the ecology of Chital in the Gir Forest, Gujarat. Post which he has worked with different organizations in the design, management, and coordination of research projects. He is currently serving as the professor of zoology at the Gujarat Education Services. He will speak to us today more on the species in focus and his research insights on the same. So over to you, sir. Sir, you're not audible. Yes.
So, good afternoon to everyone, and
Sir, if you
I'm
can bring your microphone a little closer. Your voice
hello.
is coming. Yes, better.
Okay. So, hello and good afternoon to everyone, all the participants and audience. I'm really pleased to be part of this Azadi Ka Amrit Mahotsav by CZA, and I'm really glad that CZA brought up this species, Chital, in focus. Because when India speaks about wildlife and wilderness, Chital remains somewhere in corner. Nobody talks about Chital. It's one of the non-glamorous species in India, and the reason is Chital is everywhere. All the forests across the India, we generally find the one deer species, that is Chital. And that's why when we have cheetal everywhere in all the corners of the forest, we underestimate the wilderness value of the species. This species, cheetal, is a medium-sized cervid ruminant species, and it has some important game value also. And because of that, this species has been introduced to many parts of the world. Species is there in all different continents. It's in Africa, it's in Southern America, it's in Northern America, even in islands like Hawaii, and in even in Andaman Nicobar also we have this species as an exotic species. This species was introduced in different part because of the game value. But in India, the species has a very strong uh, wilderness value because of its potential to support large carnivore population. We are proud to have a very good tiger population. We have very high density of lions and leopards in Gir. Even leopards in many parts of the forested parts of our country are getting benefited from the prey value of cheetah. But unfortunately what happens, we know many things. We have very charismatic species across India, and the focus of wildlifers, naturalists, conservationists, even managers goes to high profile species like tigers and elephants and whatnot, and cheetal generally remains unnoticed. So when I was working in Gir, I had every day a lion sighting, and the project of Wildlife Institute of India was on lion population estimation and ecological monitoring. So I every day I used to see lions and cheetal both, and I realized like people generally notice lions, but people generally uh, like under notice cheetal presence in the forest, which is the root cause of higher density of lions. So I requested my supervisor, Dr. Y. V. Jhala, that I want to work on Chital. And when I started digging up literature on Chital. Unfortunately, in India, we had very little information on this species, the ecological part or behavioral part of this species. So I thought somebody should look at the cheetal as a species which is very much important for our large carnivore population in India. Somebody has to work on this species, and I took up this opportunity to work on cheetal. And when I was looking at Chital, I found really interesting species because evolutionary point of view, when you look at the mammalian stock, it was 6 crore years ago when first mammalian stock became ungulates. From that day to the current, according to current taxonomical classification, Cheetal is belongs to one of the most diverse groups of taxonomy. So genetically, most diverse groups, or the paraphyletic groups, are the deer species, and that's how I thought. Like this species is very important. I think I share my screen, so goes along with that. Just a second. Sorry for interruption, but I is it visible, Arundhati?
Yes,
Can
yes,
you?
sir. It's visible.
Sorry,
But
I just sorry from. Okay, so that's how I chose this species to work upon, and it was very interesting journey while I was working in Gir, and it gave me an opportunity to look into the ecological part of cheetal, and especially cheetal's interaction with other groups, especially livestock. So that's how I started. And before we start, just give a little bit more about the cheetal, that uh, is one of the endemic medium-sized cervid, though it's found in many parts of the world, but there this species is exotic and taken over there to for game value. In Indian forest ecosystem, it plays a major role to support large carnivore population, and because of cheetal, we have large density or the high density of tigers and leopards and lions in different forests compared to other parts of the world. And the inherent capacity of cheetal is to reach higher density. So we have the zoo official also along with us, and he would agree with me that keeping cheetal in a zoo, like they would rapidly increase in number, and they can attain higher densities in a managed area also. So cheetal has that positive part also, which can, if you can manage cheetal population well in any forested ecosystem, you have a good prey base, and that brings the your large carnivore population, which is glamorous population for the outer world. And ecologically, the species has a very important role to play as a keystone. So if you remove cheetal from Indian forest, your other population, even the vegetation part also would collapse. So cheetal is the species which maintains the ecological structure of any site, and that's how it plays a role of keystone. The way keystone plays a role in a arc. So cheetal, that's why it's very important ecologically, and also cheetal we see generally very close to the forest edges where glade or grassland starts. It and one of the most the well-managed forest area or the protected areas in India, like Kanha or Ranthambore or Gir, they keep doing managerial practices like fire line creation, water hole, road repairing, all this. And that creates some level of disturbance, and that supports cheetal. And that's how you see more cheetal in the areas where more managerial practices are being conducted. And in fragmentations also, like some part of the Indian forest have like meadows or the grassy patches in between. So those are the areas where uh, cheetal enjoy being around. So those are the things. And for that, like when I was in Gir, I thought I should work on something interesting because we have the two ruminant together in the same picture here, Chital and livestock, a buffalo. So Gir is the area where it's an opportunity to observe both Chital and livestock together. And I thought, like, I should look into whether is there any negative impact of livestock, or they are creating some competitive scenario in the forest. What happens between Chital and livestock? So it was an ecological exploration which I undertook during my doctoral program. So I would share some of my insights about species, how Chital responds to different factors. So I mean, Chital, we know as a species from age old, like, even our epics, Ramayana and all, we talk about Chital. But ecologically, we have very little facts around where Chital goes, what do they do, how do they do. So, in wild. So, other than George Scheller's study, there was hardly anything which I found on Chital in Indian scenario. So first thing was to look at the cheetah as a species, but at the same time, my interest was to inquire upon ecological facts, or the check some ecological theories, and those theories which have been debated upon for ages. Like, Huxley, we all know Theodore Huxley, one of the legend in the field of natural history and ecology. So these theories are, like, called zombie ideas, because they are not truly alive, but neither they are dead. So we, on and off, we keep debating upon different ecological theories, and it's a very nice way to test some ecological theory at the like, medium-sized cervid or the large mammals compared, because most of these ecological theories been tested for the lab animals. So it was an opportunity for me to test these theories at the larger landscape level also. So under supervision of Dr. Jala, I tried to test different theories, and will slightly touch upon some of the findings of this test. So, like, niche theory, how animal is placed in a multidimensional space, how do they interact, whether there is any competition. So its competition is ongoing, competition is over, or there is a chance to start of a competition between two groups or two species. And the last was, like, how disturbance. So there is a very interesting theory on intermediate disturbance hypothesis, which says, like, if your succession is arrested in between in any natural ecosystem, so that gives you more opportunity to have higher productivity, and that helps the diversity of of an ecosystem. So I looked Cheetal in all different lights of these theories and hypotheses. So the central theme of this entire study was looking at Cheetal from the perspective of livestock grazed area. So livestock grazing in India is like age old, and we have a traditional profession. It's not a commercial, but people keep livestock. They go to the forest, they graze their livestock, and we have this grazing is like almost unregulated in almost all part of the country. It's intensive also in many part, like, there is nothing left in summer on ground, and this actually seems detrimental to natural vegetation community, because many areas we have seen that livestock grazing has killed the natural essence of the part. Also, whenever we see livestock grazing in some part of the natural ecosystem, we see unpalatable plant species in abundance. So that might cause the invasion of unpalatable plant species. Also, this bulk feeder like livestock, cattle, and buffalo, they deplete the food resources which was otherwise available to wild and village. So livestock grazing seems detrimental, although it has some biotic interference, may be helpful in maintaining ideal cheetah habitat, as intermediate hypothesis says that some level of disturbance can create optimal condition. So what's happening in Give? That's what one of my idea to look at. And we know, like, herders or livestock keepers, they in resource pinch period, they lop trees, and when they lop, the further increase in height of tree is is chances of increasing height is lower, so growth is stunted. And when the growth of a plant or a tree is stunted, more opportunity for ungulate to browse. So that helps in keeping a check on the browse line. And third is control. If the grazing is controlled or the number of livestock per unit area is managed, we can create the ideal grassland condition for cheetah. So otherwise, we have to burn grassland. We have to do lots of managerial practices to maintain meadow, like what we do in Kanha or maybe in Dutwa or some other areas. So controlled grazing can actually help maintaining the ideal grassland habitat for cheetah. So we did that. So before we go into the ecological insights in Chital and livestock interaction, I would give you a little bit how livestock is being placed in Gir forest. So the number are little older because when I was in Gir, it's like 10 years back. So at that time, there were 54 settlements of Maldhari. Maldhari is a traditional community who keeps livestock, and their primary and only occupation is keeping livestock and selling milk and milk products. So there were 54 such small settlements, have around few hundreds to some time around two, 300 or 500 livestock per nest for the settlement. 14 small, tiny villages with some agricultural land within the sanctuary area with around 4,000 livestock. And on top of that, we had 97 villages on the border of park, which number is like around 1 lakh livestock. And they also keep coming to park on border area and they graze their livestock. So this is the map of Gir forest, and vegetation is shown. You can see that it's a gentle undulating terrain with very mosaic of different habitats. More dry deciduous forest is more interspersed with moist deciduous and riverine forest, and some part it's scrub forest with ephemeral some rivers also, or the water sources. And within that area, I selected a patch of forest in eastern part of the sanctuary for intensive ecological uh, uh, exploration. So that area is important. I will come back to that area also. And then I built an hypothesis. Generally, what happens when we look at to wildlife studies, generally what we do, we do the observation and we make inference based on our observation. What I wanted to do was to build a strong hypothesis which I can test statistically and come out with some inference, proper scientific inference. So the presence of livestock in forest results in competition with wild ambulance. It was a hypothesis. And what were the predictions? Predictions were like, where the livestock as a sympatry. So in those areas, population performance of cheetal should suffer. So what happens? Like lower density of cheetal population, the body condition of cheetal is poor. So cheetal are lean with less fat. And third is cheetal tend to remain in a smaller group size. So they are evenly distributed for better forage resources and opportunity. So immediately after hypothesis, I did a exploration of the entire park, all 1,500 square kilometer area. We had systematic sampling on line transects for density estimation. We had condition score of cheetal through vehicle drive and group size of cheetal in ad libitum as well as line transect data. And what we find here is that cheetal densities are more in western part of Gir and less in eastern part of. While body condition score is better in eastern part of the sanctuary and poor in western part of sanctuary. While group size is again better in eastern part of the sanctuary and poorer or the smaller in central. So it doesn't make much sense because population parameters, three different parameters when we look. So one parameter is good in west and two others are in east. So what's happening? So basically, what we can say, what we can infer is like this species responds more to habitat productivity here, not as much to the presence of sympatric livestock. So the mechanism between ecological mechanism between these two sympatric species is something different. It's not simply just avoidance, like when livestock is there, cheetal are not there. Cheetals are there, livestock are not going. Both are there, both are present, but their interaction is not direct. There is something indirect ecological interaction, and if we want to explore that, we have to look into the uh, food habits, niche diet, niche overlap, habitat use, and all these things. So the intensive study area which I shown in eastern part of the sanctuary, there were four different kinds of broad habitat categories. One is scrubland, which you can see, the cheetal herds are there. Second is Enogesus mixed dry deciduous forest, little bit thicker, visibility is less. You can see one stag is going. Another is like along the river, stretches of river, you have the on both bank of the river, you have the evergreen kind of tree species. So, and fourth one, which is generally on the top of hills, tabletop hills, steep undulating terrains, we have open forest with largely dominated by Boswellia, Lania, as well as Terminalia species. So this when density estimation I plotted on a precipitation map, what I find here is it seems like density is more driven by habitat productivity through rainfall. So rainfall is higher in western part of the sanctuary and less in eastern part of the sanctuary. And same way, population density of cheetal is higher in western part, lower in. So productivity directly affects the population. One of the important parameters of population performance is density. So density is driven. It seems driven by this thing. And here is the sampling for how I sampled the entire park. So these are the red lines are the systematic line transects laid in different administrative parts of the round of the Gir forest. Every round or block had one line transect measuring around 3 kilometers. And I also sampled random line transects in intensive area, more number of line transects randomly selected in intensive area. And when compared both the population estimation, so within the intensive study area, when we did the systematic sampling, the population density was a bit low. But when we did random sampling, we had more density, which shows that cheetal distribution is not even. So on a systematic sampling in a larger area, only one line transit, we might miss the number. But when we have the random line transits, we have more chances to encounter more number of cheetahs. So they are like sporadic distribution within intensive study area. So, how do we look at the ecological part of this interaction? So, once we have the larger landscape like Gir 1500 square kilometer area, how these settlements are located, and how these both groups like cheetah and livestock are moving around. What are their movement patterns? Where they are. Second, the smaller scale is like within this larger landscape. What are the habitats? And how these habitats are being used by these groups. And within this, at third scale, it's a micro scale. Within that small habitat, what exact food items are contributing to diets of cheetah and livestock? So I looked at all these three scales: larger scale, little smaller scale, and micro scale, for understanding the interaction between these things. And I am just keeping the methodology part because, like, if somebody is interested, can ask me. I can explain the methods part. But I looked at the habitat use through scan sampling, behavioral and habitat use by scan sampling and continuous monitoring, grazing circuits, food habits by direct observation. You can see the picture, what animals are eating on ground directly, and then simulate a bite, then later do laboratory analysis for nutritional contribution of each food item to the total diet. So up to nutritional part I computed for each food item. So first, when we plotted all the GPS location of both the groups, Chital and Livestock, in different season, how they are spaced. what areas they move, how long they go. And their movement pattern says that there is no seasonality. All three seasons, for them, it's the same. They roam in the monsoon as good as in winter, as good as in summer. And the difference is between species. So Chital tend to move little less than 2 kilometers a day, while livestock they roam larger area, larger body size, larger herd composition. So they roam larger area, so they travel per day 6 to 7 kilometers, while Chital around 2 kilometers a day. When in this movement pattern, when we analyze that what habitat they spend more time, and in total area use, what is the contribution of different habitats? So, and especially for foraging, so it shows that during winter, Acacia ziziphus is plays a key role. But for livestock, there is a fourth habitat, Boswellia lania terminalia, which is an hilltop, which is not used by cheetah at all. So that fourth habitat is the key for coexistence between these two species. I can say as of now that Boswellia lania terminalia for foraging livestock contributes largely to their habitat use, and that's why cheetah and livestock can remain in the same area, but the different habitats. Same way in summer also, Boswellia lania terminalia is doing good for livestock, not used by them. Another important thing is like that Enogesis latifolia, which is like little dense forest in summer when temperature is a bit higher. Uh, they take shade in Enogesis latifolia, but livestock generally go to the riverine pitches more, and uh, their preference is still scrubland and less in Enogesis latifolia. In monsoon, Enogesis Boswellia lania is a very important part because when there is a very hardly anything left on ground. While I'm saying monsoon, monsoon means the beginning of monsoon, early days of monsoon when the heavy showers after summer. So it's a rainy, but still ground cover is poor. So when ground cover is poor, chicken does mostly their diet part in riverine forest. It's a preferred one. They get more food from there, and livestock get more food from grassy hillocks like Boswellia lania. And when we compare cheetah and livestock in different ways, you can see that Boswellia lania is the habitat, which is the key habitat for both to remain in the same landscape over a long period of time. And Acacia ziziphus is the habitat which is preferred by Chital, while Boswellia lania is preferred by livestock. Now, how food is coming from different habitats. So, Chital, the scrubland, Acacia has very nutritious pods. Ziziphus has very nutritious fruits. It's almost 50% comes from Acacia ziziphus, while in case of livestock, it's quite diverse, but it gets almost 30% from Boswellia and then 35% from Enogesis dry deciduous forest. So foraging portion of livestock comes more from grassy areas, while for cheetah it comes largely from the Acacia ziziphus scrubland, which offers more browse opportunity rather than grazing opportunity. So when we look at the food habits of all three cheetal, cattle, and buffalo, what do they eat? And what is the contribution of dry biomass of each species? And you see there is a clear difference between cheetal and livestock. So cheetal, generally we believe cheetal is a grazer, but it's a plastic species and it's a mixed feeder, a opportunistic feeder, and that exactly reflects in this graph. In winter, there is a clear difference between what is eaten by cheetal, what is eaten by cattle and buffalo. And you see that cheetal food largely comes from Acacia ziziphus, both the fruits and pods, which are there hanging on a thorny scrub, which is because of the size of mouth and the design of snout. Cheetal can easily pluck out this important, very nutritious food, but cattle and buffalo cannot. So they have to be more dependent on grasses or the bulk. In summer also, again, Chital, when there's Acacia nilotica is fruiting, so it has fruit of acacia, it has leaves of ziphus, and some Ca- Caparisapedia, but mostly all the browse items even in summer. Summer is the period when there is resource crunch, there is hardly anything left on ground to graze, very poor ground cover on forest floor, but livestock they go into the hilly areas and they have more opportunity to feed on the bulk grasses which are not many grass species which are like Aristida species for an example, which is not a very nutritious species. It's thorny species, but livestock as a bulk feeder, and they need more to eat than quality to eat, so they prefer Aristida. And in monsoon, there is a clear demarcation. The only species which is like Aristida, which is the time when monsoon, when the Aristida is the first species to come up. So Cheetals eats on that very tender shoots of Aristida, but rest all comes mostly from acacia and the tender grasses, which I could not identify at that time because the grass was too short to identify. While livestock, you can see that Armopogon, which is a perennial grass, and perennial grass has very poor uh, nutritious quality. It is the bulk of the diet of cheetal, cattle, and buffalo. So, looking at the diets of both these groups, or these cheetal and livestock, and competing the diet overlap, you can see that niche overlap is like between cattle and buffalo. Obviously, it's like same size animal, so they have like more than 50% overlap across the uh, seasons. But between cheetal and cattle, between cheetal and buffalo, it's never more than 20%. So what cheetal eats is completely different, 80% different than what livestock eats in the same area. So we see the both the species in the same area, same habitat, but both eat the different food items. So when they have different food items in the same area, they hardly compete for this thing. So competition chances is minimal, and therefore they can coexist because they have different food preferences. But that happens when um, uh, extreme stress, like here is the area where we have the frequent drought conditions. So when the extreme stress condition, there might be an overlap between cheetal and cattle diets. So there are chances of competition during resource pinch period. Then it's not only about the food, but the livestock, uh, other than grazing, they do trampling, and livestock is facilitated by human. So human presence, livestock trampling, the disease transmission, all these things can actually det- have detrimental impact. So secondary impacts I have not looked at, but there are tremendous scope to study secondary impact of livestock on wild ungulate population. And second, here is the ideal condition where the population of livestock is controlled by department, forest department. So number of livestock is always less than the carrying capacity or the less than the stress condition. So livestock population, if it is uncontrolled livestock population, then there would be a chance for a fierce competition for resources. So I think that's it, and I think I shared, and I must acknowledge WII for giving me an opportunity to study Gujarat for this Gir Forest, and State Forest Department for all their support and help, and other all the staffs of Wildlife Institute, Forest Department, and the people of Gir who invited me, and they also appreciated my work and gave me an opportunity to be the part of their family. Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you,
you,
sir,
Arun.
for thank you, sir, for the detailed presentation on the species in focus, as well as sharing your research insights from your work in Gir. So we will take question answers for this session after the section on the zoo is over. So we now move on to the Know Your Zoo section of today's talk. So joined in today to speak to us on the zoo is Mr. Swarn Singh. Mr. Singh is the Divisional Forest Officer, Territorial and Officer in charge of the Mini Zoo Cum Deer Park, Bhatinda. He's a Punjab Forest Service officer having vast experience in forest management and animal welfare. Mr. Singh is also keen to bring best practices in animal welfare and in the management standards in the Bhatinda Zoo. So he will speak to us today more on the zoo in focus. So over to you, sir. I will share the presentation for you. सर क्या आप प्रेजेंटेशन देख पा रहे हैं
जी जी जी
जी ओके सर प्लीज बता
गुड
दीजिए
आफ्टरनून मैम।
जब चेंज करना हो
जी जी नेक्स्ट मैम।
सॉरी एक presentation for you.
ਮਿੰਨੀ ਜੂ ਬੀੜਤਲਾ ਮੈਮ ਜੇ ਮਤਲਬ ਸਾਊਥ ਵੈਸਟ ਪਾਰਟ ਆਫ ਦਾ ਅਟਰੈਕਟਿਵ ਪਾਰਟ ਆਫ ਦਾ ਏਰੀਆ, ਕਿਉਂਕਿ ਮਤਲਬ ਇੱਥੇ ਗ੍ਰੀਨਰੀ ਜ਼ਿਆਦਾ ਹੈਗੀ। ਬਠਿੰਡਾ ਸਿਟੀ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਕੋਈ ਮਤਲਬ ਇਹ ਗ੍ਰੀਨ ਪਾਰਟ ਨਹੀਂ ਹੈ, ਇਸ ਕਰਕੇ ਮਤਲਬ ਇਹ ਅਟਰੈਕਟਿਵ ਪਾਰਟ ਹੈਗਾ। ਇਹ
सर क्या
ਜਿਹੜਾ
प्रेजेंटेशन देख पा रहे हैं
ਇੱਥੇ ਮੈਕਸਿਮਮ ਜ਼ਿਆਦਾ ਕੋਲਡ ਹੁੰਦੀ ਹੈ ਜਾਂ ਸਮਰ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਐਕਸਟ੍ਰੀਮ ਹੌਟ
प्लीज
ਹੁੰਦੀ
बता
ਹੈ।
दीजिए जब चेंज करना हो
ਗਰਮੀ ਔਰ ਠੰਡ ਬਹੁਤ ਜ਼ਿਆਦਾ ਹੁੰਦੀ ਹੈਗੀ। ਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਲੱਗਦਾ, ਇਸ ਕਰਕੇ ਇਹਦੇ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਸੋਇਲ ਤੇ ਵੈਜੀਟੇਸ਼ਨ ਹੈਗੀ ਇਹ ਡੈਜ਼ਰਟ ਲਾਈਕ ਹੁੰਦੀ ਹੈ। ਮੈਂ ਨੈਕਸਟ ਐਕਚੁਅਲੀ ਜੋ ਮਿੰਨੀ ਜੋ ਬੀੜਤਲਾ ਹੈ ਮੈਮ, ਇਹ ਪਹਿਲਾਂ 1978 ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਰੈੱਡ ਕਰਾਸ ਸੋਸਾਇਟੀ ਦੇ ਅੰਡਰ ਸੀਗਾ। ਉਸ ਤੋਂ ਬਾਅਦ ਇਹ ਪ੍ਰੋਟੈਕਟਡ ਏਰੀਆ ਹੈਗਾ। ਬਠਿੰਡਾ ਸਿਟੀ ਤੋਂ ਨੀਅਰ ਅਬਾਊਟ ਇਹ 6 ਕਿਲੋਮੀਟਰ ਟਾਊਨ ਤੋਂ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਹੈਗਾ ਦੂਰ ਤੇ ਹੈਗਾ। ਜਿਹੜਾ ਟੋਟਲ ਏਰੀਆ ਇਹਦਾ ਮਿੰਨੀ ਜੂ ਦਾ ਇਹ 161 ਏਕੜ ਹੈਗਾ ਜੀ। ਇਹਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ 22 ਏਕੜ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਹੈਗਾ ਉਹ ਜੂ ਦਾ ਏਰੀਆ ਜੀ। 74 ਏਕੜ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਇਹਦਾ ਸਫਾਰੀ ਡੀਐਸ ਵੀ ਨੈਕਸਟ ਈਅਰ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਸਾਡੀ ਪ੍ਰਪੋਜ਼ਲ ਹੈ ਵੀ ਇਹਨੂੰ ਸਟਾਰਟ ਕਰਨੀ ਹੈ ਜੀ। ਨੈਕਸਟ ਮੈਮ, ਇਹ ਮੈਡਮ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਵਿਜ਼ਟਰ ਹੈਗੇ ਮਤਲਬ ਲਾਸਟ 2021 ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਥੋੜੀ ਜਿਹੀ ਪ੍ਰੋਬਲਮ ਆਈ ਸੀਗੀ ਇਹਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ, ਇਹਦਾ ਰੈਵਨਿਊ ਵੀ ਥੋੜਾ ਜਿਹਾ ਇਹਦੇ ਡਿਕਰੀਜ਼ ਹੋਇਆ ਹੈਗਾ। ਨੈਕਸਟ ਮਿੰਨੀ ਜੂ ਡੀਅਰ ਸਫਾਰੀ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਜੀ ਮਤਲਬ 6 ਐਨੀਮਲ ਸਪੀਸੀਜ਼ ਹੈਗੀਆਂ ਤੇ 10 ਜਿਹੜੀਆਂ ਇਹਦੀਆਂ ਬਰਡ ਸਪੀਸੀਜ਼ ਹੈਗੀਆਂ। ਇਹਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਪੀਫੌਲ ਹੋ ਗਿਆ, ਡਵ ਹੋ ਗਿਆ, ਪੈਟੇਜ ਬਲੈਕ ਹੋ ਗਏ, ਪੈਟੇਜ ਬਰਾਊਨ ਹੋ ਪੈਰਾਕੀਟ ਹੋ ਗਿਆ, ਵਾਈਟ ਸਪੈਰੋ ਹੋ ਗਿਆ, ਫੈਂਚ ਹੋ ਗਿਆ। ਨੈਕਸਟ ਮੈਡਮ, 6 ਐਨੀਮਲ ਸਪੀਸੀਜ਼ ਹੈ ਮੈਡਮ ਇਹਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ। ਫਸਟ ਹੈ ਇਹਦੇ ਬਲੈਕ ਬੱਕ ਹੈਗੇ, ਲੈਪਰਡ ਹੈਗਾ, ਮੰਕੀ ਹੈਗਾ, ਸਪੋਟਰ ਡੀਅਰ ਹੈਗਾ, ਸਾਂਬਰ ਆ, ਪਾਰਕੂਪਾਈਨ ਹੈਗੇ। ਨੈਕਸਟ ਸਫਾਰੀ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਸਾਡੇ ਮੇਨ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਅਟਰੈਕਟਿਵ ਪਾਰਟ ਹੈ ਇਹਦਾ ਜੀ, ਓਪਨ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਮਤਲਬ ਉੱਥੇ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਪੀ ਫਾਊਲ ਵੀ ਮਤਲਬ ਮੋਰ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਹੈਗੇ ਉਹ ਲਾਨ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਘੁੰਮਦੇ ਫਿਰਦੇ ਨਜ਼ਰ ਆਉਣਗੇ। ਨੈਕਸਟ ਮੈਡਮ, ਜੋ ਇੱਥੇ ਤਾਂ ਸਾਡੇ ਡੀਅਰ ਸਪਾਈ ਵਾਸਤੇ ਅਸੀਂ ਜਿਵੇਂ ਵੀਲ ਚੇਅਰ ਰੱਖੀ ਹੋਈ ਹੈ ਜੀ, ਜੋ ਵੀ ਮਤਲਬ ਕਿਸੇ ਨੂੰ ਕੋਈ ਪ੍ਰੋਬਲਮ ਹੈ, ਕੋਈ ਹੈਂਡੀਕੈਪਟ ਹੈਗਾ, ਉਹਦੇ ਵਾਸਤੇ ਅਸੀਂ ਵੀਲ ਚੇਅਰ ਪ੍ਰੋਵਾਈਡ ਕਰਦੇ ਹੈਗੇ। ਉਸ ਤੋਂ ਬਾਅਦ ਡਰਿੰਕਿੰਗ ਵਾਟਰ ਦਾ ਮਤਲਬ ਸਾਫ਼ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਪਾਣੀ ਹੈਗਾ, ਉਹ ਡਰਿੰਕਿੰਗ ਵਾਟਰ ਦਾ ਅਸੀਂ ਇੱਥੇ ਕੀਤਾ ਹੋਇਆ ਹੈਗਾ। ਫਿਰ ਇੱਥੇ ਬੈਂਚੇਜ ਆ, ਮਤਲਬ ਪੀਪਲ ਆ ਕੇ ਬੈਠ ਸਕਦੇ ਹੈਗੇ, ਮਤਲਬ ਉਹਦਾ ਫਿਰ ਪਾਰਕਿੰਗ ਹੈਗੀ ਜੀ। ਫਿਰ ਇਹਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਗਜੀਬੋ ਆ ਗਏ। ਉਸ ਤੋਂ ਬਾਅਦ ਇਸ 'ਤੇ ਮਤਲਬ ਗਾਈਡ ਕਰਨ ਵਾਸਤੇ ਸਾਡੇ ਕੋਲੇ ਹੈਗਾ ਜੀ ਇੱਕ ਗਾਈਡਰ ਹੈਗਾ ਲੜਕਾ, ਉਹ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਸਕੂਲ ਦੇ ਬੱਚੇ ਆ ਜਾਂ ਕੋਈ ਹੋਰ ਆਉਂਦਾ ਹੈਗਾ, ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਉਹ ਗਾਈਡ ਕਰਦਾ ਹੈਗਾ ਜੀ। ਨੈਕਸਟ, ਇਹ ਸਾਡੇ ਐਨੀਮਲ ਜੋ ਹੈ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੇ ਮਤਲਬ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਉਹ ਚੈੱਕ ਕਰਕੇ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਅੱਗੇ ਫਰਦਰ ਸਪਲਾਈ ਕੀਤਾ ਜਾਂਦਾ ਹੈਗਾ। ਇਹਨਾਂ ਦੀ ਕੁਆਲਿਟੀ ਔਰ ਕੁਆਂਟੀਟੀ ਦੋਨਾਂ ਦਾ ਮਤਲਬ ਧਿਆਨ ਰੱਖ ਕੇ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਵਧੀਆ ਫੂਡ ਪ੍ਰੋਵਾਈਡ ਕੀਤਾ ਜਾਂਦਾ ਹੈ। ਨੈਕਸਟ ਮੈਡਮ, ਇੱਕ ਸਾਡੇ ਕੋਲੇ ਹਸਪੀਟਲ ਆ ਜਾਏਗਾ ਜੀ। ਹਸਪੀਟਲ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਸਾਡੇ ਕੋਲੇ ਇਨਕੂਬੇਸ਼ਨ ਯੂਨਿਟ ਆਏਗਾ, ਜਿਹੜਾ ਕਿ ਇਨਕੂਬੇਸ਼ਨ ਆਫ ਬਰਡ ਐਗ ਦੇ ਇਨਕੂਬੇਸ਼ਨ ਅਸੀਂ ਇਹ ਕਰਦੇ ਹੈਗੇ, ਜਿਹੜੇ ਐਗਜ਼ ਦੇ ਆ ਮੈਡਮ। ਇਹ ਮਤਲਬ ਕੋਈ ਪ੍ਰੋਬਲਮ ਆ ਉਹਦੇ ਰਿਗਾਰਡਿੰਗ ਇਹਨੂੰ ਇੱਥੇ ਚੈੱਕ ਕਰਦੇ ਹੈਗੇ। ਨੈਕਸਟ ਮੈਡਮ, ਐਨੀਮਲ ਦੀ ਕੇਅਰ ਵਾਸਤੇ KMN4 ਸੋਲਿਊਸ਼ਨ, ਜਦੋਂ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਦੀ ਕੋਈ ਵਹੀਕਲ ਆ ਜਾਂ ਕਿਸੇ ਦੀ ਐਂਟਰਿੰਗ ਹੁੰਦੀ ਹੈ, ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਪਹਿਲਾਂ ਇਹਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਡਿਪ ਕਰਕੇ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੇ ਟਾਇਰ ਜਾਂ ਸ਼ੂ ਆ ਗਏ, ਫਿਰ
Next, please.
ਸੀਜ਼ਨਲ ਕੇਅਰ ਐਨੀਮਲ ਦੇ ਲਈ ਸਾਡੇ ਕੋਲੇ ਜੂ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਮੈਡਮ ਹੀਟਰ ਹੈਗੇ। ਉਸ ਤੋਂ ਬਾਅਦ ਅਸੀਂ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਮਤਲਬ ਗਰਮੀ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਮਤਲਬ ਉਹ ਥੋੜ੍ਹਾ ਜਿਹਾ ਕੰਫਰਟ ਰਹਿਣ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਐਨੀਮਲ ਹੈਗੇ, ਇਸ ਕਰਕੇ ਇਹ ਮਤਲਬ ਸਾਰੀ ਸਾਡੇ ਕੋਲੇ ਇਹਦੀ ਸੁਵਿਧਾ ਹੈ ਜੀ। ਨੈਕਸਟ, ਸਾਡੇ ਕੋਲ ਇੱਕ ਬਟਰਫਲਾਈ ਪਾਰਕ ਹੈ ਜੀ। ਬਟਰਫਲਾਈ ਪਾਰਕ ਕਿਸੇ ਹਾਰਡਲੀ 2 ਸਾਲ ਪਹਿਲਾਂ ਇਹਨੂੰ ਸ਼ੁਰੂ ਕੀਤਾ ਹੈਗਾ। ਇਹਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਮਤਲਬ ਜੋ ਵੀ ਬਟਰਫਲਾਈ ਨੂੰ ਅਟਰੈਕਟਿਵ ਕਰਦੇ ਹੈਗੇ, ਮੇਨਲੀ ਉਹ ਅਸੀਂ ਸਪੀਸੀਜ਼ ਇਹਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਲਾਈ ਵੀ ਹੈਗੀ। ਨੈਕਸਟ ਮੈਡਮ,
Next, please.
ਇਸ ਤੋਂ ਬਾਅਦ ਮੈਡਮ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਕੋਈ ਬੱਚੇ ਆਉਂਦੇ ਸਾਡੇ ਕੋਈ ਸਕੂਲਾਂ ਦੇ, ਉਹਨਾਂ ਵਾਸਤੇ ਅਸੀਂ ਵਾਈਲਡ ਲਾਈਫ ਕੰਜ਼ਰਵੇਸ਼ਨ ਮਤਲਬ ਇੱਕ ਇੰਟਰਪ੍ਰੀਟੇਸ਼ਨ ਹੈਗਾ, ਉਹ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਮਤਲਬ ਵੱਖ-ਵੱਖ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਦੇ ਉੱਥੇ ਡਿਸਪਲੇ ਹੈਗੀਆਂ ਕੀਤੀਆਂ ਬੱਚਿਆਂ ਨੂੰ ਮਤਲਬ ਕਰਦੇ ਆ ਜੀ।
Next, please.
ਇਹ ਇੰਟਰਪ੍ਰੀਟੇਸ਼ਨ ਸੈਂਟਰ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚੋਂ ਆ ਮੈਡਮ, ਜੋ ਵੀ ਮਤਲਬ ਬੱਚਿਆਂ ਇਹ ਉਹਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਇੰਟਰਪ੍ਰੀਟੇਸ਼ਨ ਸੈਂਟਰ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਵੈਟਲੈਂਡ ਬਾਇਓਡਾਇਵਰਸਿਟੀ ਇੱਕੋ ਮਤਲਬ ਮੋਰਲ ਡਿਸਪਲੇ ਕੀਤਾ ਹੋਇਆ ਹੈਗਾ। ਨੈਕਸਟ ਮੈਡਮ, ਮੈਡਮ ਸਾਡੇ ਅਲੱਗ-ਅਲੱਗ ਜਿਵੇਂ ਇੰਪੋਰਟੈਂਟ ਡੇ ਹੁੰਦੇ ਹੈਗੇ, ਉਸ ਦੇ ਉੱਤੇ ਅਸੀਂ ਇਹਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਅਵੇਅਰਨੈਸ ਬੱਚਿਆਂ ਨੂੰ ਮਤਲਬ ਸੈਲੀਬ੍ਰੇਸ਼ਨ ਕਰਦੇ ਹੈਗੇ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਇਹ ਸਵੱਛ ਭਾਰਤ ਦਾ ਅਸੀਂ 2 ਅਕਤੂਬਰ ਨੂੰ ਮਨਾਇਆ ਸੀਗਾ। ਇਹਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਉਸਦੇ ਹੈਗੇ ਆ ਡਿਸਪਲੇ ਕੀਤੇ ਹੋਏ। ਨੈਕਸਟ ਇਹ
previous slide, ma'am. Previous slide.
So the paintings are not loaded here. For some reason, it's not showing up. So that's why I moved further.
ਜੋ ਸਕੂਲ ਦੇ ਮੈਮ ਬੱਚੇ ਹੈਗੇ ਉਸ ਤੋਂ ਮਤਲਬ ਜੋ ਪੇਂਟਿੰਗ ਕਰਾਉਂਦੇ ਆ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਦਾ ਕੰਪੀਟੀਸ਼ਨ ਹੋ ਰਿਹਾ। ਨੂੰ ਆਪਾਂ ਐਨੀਮਲ ਜਾਂ ਬਰਡਸ ਨੂੰ ਜਾਂ ਆਉਲਸ ਹੋ ਗਏ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੇ ਮਤਲਬ ਕੋਈ ਮਿਸਯੂਜ਼ ਹੈਗੇ ਉਹਦੇ ਵਾਸਤੇ ਸੀ ਮਤਲਬ ਇਹਦਾ ਮਤਲਬ ਬੱਚਿਆਂ ਨੂੰ ਇਹਦੇ ਬਾਰੇ ਅਵੇਅਰ ਕਰਦੇ ਹੈਗੇ। ਇਹ ਰਿਗਾਰਡਿੰਗ ਸਨੈਕ ਮੈਡਮ ਕੰਪੀਟੀਸ਼ਨ ਦਾ ਹੈਗਾ। ਨੈਕਸਟ ਮੈਡਮ ਇਹ ਐਨੀਮਲ ਅਡਾਪਟੇਸ਼ਨ ਸਕੀਮ ਆ ਸਾਡੇ ਕੋਲੇ। ਜੋ ਵੀ ਕਿਸੇ ਨੇ ਮਤਲਬ ਐਨੀਮਲ ਅਡਾਪਟ ਕਰਨਾ ਹੁੰਦਾ ਹੈਗਾ ਉਹਦੇ ਮਤਲਬ ਅਲੱਗ-ਅਲੱਗ ਉਹਦੇ ਰੇਟ ਆ ਗਏ ਉਸ ਦੇ ਅਕੋਰਡਿੰਗ ਉਹਨੂੰ ਇਨ ਫਿਊਚਰ ਦੀ ਪਲੈਨਿੰਗ ਹੈ ਜੀ। ਇਸ ਸਾਲ ਅਸੀਂ ਕ੍ਰੀਏਸ਼ਨ ਆਫ ਨਿਊ ਬਰਡ ਇਨਕਲੋਜਰ, ਅਪਡੇਟਿੰਗ ਆਫ ਇੰਟਰਪ੍ਰੀਟੇਸ਼ਨ ਸੈਂਟਰ, ਕ੍ਰੀਏਸ਼ਨ ਆਫ ਮੋਰ ਪਬਲਿਕ ਮੇਨਟੇਨ ਜਿਹੜਾ 2023 ਦਾ ਹੈ, ਐਡਿੰਗ ਆਫ ਨਿਊ ਐਨੀਮਲ ਟੂ ਦਾ ਕਲੈਕਸ਼ਨ ਲਾਈਕ ਟਾਈਗਰ for snakes and introducing them to zoo। 25 ਦਾ ਹੈ ਲੈਂਡਸਕੇਪਿੰਗ ਦਾ ਵਰਕ ਹੈ। ਸਾਡੇ ਫਿਊਚਰ ਦੀ ਪਲੈਨਿੰਗ ਹੈ ਜੀ ਇਹ। ਥੈਂਕ ਯੂ ਮੈਮ। ਇਸ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਅਸੀਂ ਸ਼ੋ ਕੀਤਾ ਹੋਇਆ ਵੀ ਮਤਲਬ ਪਲਾਸਟਿਕ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਮਤਲਬ ਉਹਦੀ ਹੈ ਰੀਯੂਜ਼ ਦਾ ਹੈ। ਨੈਕਸਟ ਇਹਦਾ ਰੀਸਾਈਕਲ
Right. Thank you so much, sir. आपने बहुत ही अच्छे से मतलब एक ओवरव्यू दिया जू के बारे में और जो आपके प्लान्स हैं आगे के। तो अभी इसके साथ हम आगे बढ़ते हैं क्वेश्चन आंसर्स की तरफ। तो डॉक्टर दवे, आर यू विद अस? Dr. Dave, can you hear me? ओके तो फिर हम एक काम करते हैं, वी विल टेक क्वेश्चंस फॉर द जू फर्स्ट। तो सर आपके लिए जो पहला सवाल है वो ये है कि जू जैसे भटिंडा सिटी में है तो वो कैसे कंट्रीब्यूट करती है लोगों के रिक्रिएशन के लिए और जैसे हॉबीज के लिए, आप अगर बता सकें।
People from the nearby areas, like actually Bhatinda is located in the proximity of Rajasthan, as earlier sir told, and we have Haryana also, the borderline. The people from that Bhatinda itself, we have that cantonment area, and during the Saturdays and born and brought up here, they come, they do enjoy here, and they bring their families to they kind of picnic also, and we give them as much as awareness as possible in these 2 days at the maximum. We utilize their presence in the zoo.
Okay, sir. And sir, the second question for you is कि due to the COVID pandemic जो है और अब हुआ था और अभी भी है, आपकी जू को कौन सी चुनौतियों का सामना करना पड़ा था और मतलब आपने कैसे बेस्ट प्रैक्टिसेस बनाए हैं कोप करने के लिए ऐसे सिचुएशन में?
मैम उसमें क्या है, जो विजिटर आते हैं तो उनको सी जो कोविड के नॉर्मा उसको फॉलो अप करते हैं, जैसे उनका डिस्टेंस उनका मेंटेन रखते हैं। कि वो मतलब जब जो एनक्लोजर के पास होते हैं तो तब उसके टाइम भी थोड़ा या उसका डिस्टेंस मेंटेन रखते हैं, उनका टेम्परेचर देखते हैं। ये मतलब उनको ध्यान रख के थोड़ा या कोविड के टाइम हम उनकी हेल्प करते हैं।
ओके सर, और सर आपके जैसे कोई एजुकेशन प्रोग्राम्स हैं जिसके तहत आप जैसे विजिटर्स अवेयरनेस बढ़ाते हैं, आपने मेंशन किया है अपने स्लाइड में, बट अगर आपके पास और कोई ऐसे मतलब स्पेसिफिक आप एजुकेशन प्रोग्राम्स या अवेयरनेस सेशंस आप रन करते हैं ड्यूरिंग द ईयर फॉर विजिटर्स?
जी मैम, जो जैसे मतलब वाइल्ड लाइफ वीक होता है, उस टाइम हम इनको बच्चों को मतलब अवेयरनेस वीक उसके लिए स्टडी उसको देते हैं। अदरवाइज भी मतलब स्कूल के बच्चे आते रहते हैं एंड ऑफ द वीक संडे, तो हमारा गाइड होता है।
ओके, सो सर दोज वर द वही यही क्वेश्चंस आए थे आपके लिए। सो डॉक्टर दवे, आर यू विद अस राइट नाउ?
Yes.
Or have we? Okay,
Yeah.
fine, fine, sir. So the first question for you is that so Chital is like the most popular animal exhibit in zoos. How do you think but however population management is a challenge for the species because it's a herd living species. Do you have any suggestions on how one can manage the same?
See, zoo animals are like, I mean, I don't have any expertise on managing zoo population, but their male and female, they maintaining their pedigree, proper pedigree, and isolating the weaker animals from the population and keeping the best because they are monogamous species, cheetah is. So a male keeps a female during the rutting time, and he fathers the fawn. So you keep the best male in a population, you keep the healthier males in the population, and you separate out the weaker population, weaker male from the this thing. Second, to improve the population, the numbers, you provide the better opportunity, so they breed well and they give you the more fawns. To reduce their breeding chances, you separate out the females which are in estrus. So every 3 week, cheetal female comes in estrus. So that's the time when female is in estrus, you just separate them out, breeding females. So you can lower the chances of breeding, and that's how you can maintain the lower population. So both can be done at zoo level.
All right, sir. And so the next question for you is can you elaborate more on on the bite count sampling that you had done for while studying Chital and during your time in Gir?
I knew somebody would ask. See, this is the only and this is the only and best way to look at the food habit. It's the direct observation. So when an animal is feeding, you look at the animal and you see what animal is eating. But to sample that, you have to look at, you have to count them in some unit. So for me, the unit was the bite. So every time food is plucked from the plant, whether it's a fruit or leaf or a grass blade, whatever. So whenever it's a one plucking has happened by the cheetah or livestock, you take a note of the species, which species is been taken, and then you have several hundred bites of each species every season. like acacia fruit. So several times, hundreds of times, you have observed taking a bite of fruit, bite of grass, and then end of the season, you simulate the bite. So when you look at the animal feeding through a spotting scope or a high power binocular, you can actually look to what amount of food is being plucked. So you simulate that from that plant and you take a similar size or weight of bite from the plant. You take the fresh weight of the bite, then you dry them in dry air oven at 60-degree temperature and take the dry weight. Then after taking dry weight, you compute the total diet and according to the proportion of the time spent by that animal in particular habitat like acacia ziziphus, enogesis or something, and then you compute the 100% diet and each part, the acacia fruit is 2% or 5% or something, you can actually compute that. It's there in many publications. Dr. Jala's one paper in Journal of Applied Ecology is on blackbuck diet. Mine and Dr. Jala's paper is in pipeline, so maybe very soon it will be there on food habits of cheetah. So that is a very scientific method to compute food habit of ungulate species, especially because they are very mixed feeder. So we can't do like we can do it for carnivores because they have four chambered stomach. So nothing is when you look at the dropping, you cannot make out what is being eaten by animal. Yeah, ma'am.
All right. Right, sir. So the next question for you is that Chital are group living species, like group living animals. Have there been any studies done on group size composition? And if yes,
Many.
if you could elaborate on it as well.
See, group size, there are many. In Indian scenario, George Scheller in 67, his book Deer on Tiger, he talks about group sizes in different parts, different important forest area of India. Uh, then there is a paper by Dr. A.J.T. Johnson and K. Shankar also. Then there is a study in Tamil Nadu, one study. So there are some studies which talks about just about group sizes, but I looked at group size as in population performance. So even my study also talks about the group sizes of cheetah in different parts of the same protected area Gir. Different season also I looked at the how group size responds to livestock grazing regime.
All right, sir. And so the last question for you is that overall, how has cheetal population fared in India and neighboring countries? And do you think any conservation measures are needed?
Cheetal population was there in Pakistan also before independence, but completely wiped out. So in our neighborhood, Pakistan was the country who was sharing cheetal population, but there is nothing. Cheetal distribution is between Brahmaputra on eastern side and Indus on western side. And on northern limit is Himalaya and southern limit is Sri Lanka. So part of Bangladesh in Sundarbans we have cheetal. In Himalayan Tarai region, Bhabar and Tarai belt, we have cheetal in Nepal. And across the India, all kinds of dry deciduous forest to moist forest, grasslands everywhere. So cheetal is there. Their management requires just protection, nothing else. So in forested area, if you give proper protection, and they would easily bounce back in numbers. So in all the protected areas, there are studies by Karant, Ulas Karant and his team in different parts of the country. There are many other studies on population estimation, and all the studies says like cheetal densities are very high in very good protected areas like Kanha, Ranthambore, even in Mudumalai, Nagarhole, Gir. So the just one management advice is protection. Second is keeping habitat moderately disturbed through managerial interventions like providing water hole at regular intervals. You create open spaces in dense forest. So Chital prefers the edge forest. So they require open spaces in larger forest areas. Yeah, ma'am. That's it.
All right, sir. So those were the questions for you. And with that, we come to an end to our 37th Know Your Species, Know Your Zoo talk. So on behalf of CZA, I would like to thank you, Dr. Dave, and to Mr. Swan Singh for taking time out of their busy schedules and joining us for this talk, which is part of the Amrit Mahotsav series. And I would also like to inform the audience, and I would also like to thank the audience firstly for joining us for this talk. And I would also like to inform them that Bhatinda Zoo will be continuing the outreach activities till the end of the week. So do visit the zoo to know more on what they have planned. And we will be back next week on Wednesday from 4 to 5 p.m. on our 38th, no, with our 30th Know Your Species, Know Your Zoo talk on the Northern Goshawk and the Ludhiana Zoo. So do tune into that talk as well. And thank you so much. Namaskar.